her mother asked. "You're 26 years old. What man would want to marry a woman of such an age?" Olivia knew better. With her green eyes and a swirl of honey blonde hair curled around her face, she had no shortage of boyfriends. Herbert Flannery, district manager for Southern Atlantic Telephone, had on 3 different occasions proposed marriage, the last time in the spring of 1929. That particular proposal followed on the heels of the worst winter Richmond had ever seen. Months and months of ice crusted to window panes and milk frozen before you could fetch it from the doorstep. In late December, Olivia crocheted herself a wool scarf so oversized she could circle it around her throat 3 times and tuck her nose inside. Although she'd bundle herself in layers of sweaters, boots, and that scarf, she'd come in from the cold with her nose glowing like a stoplight and her feet near frozen. That winter there were few parties, and people did very little socializing. So Olivia spent most of her evenings at home swaddled in a chenille bathrobe as she tried to stay warm. In March, a month when she expected the crocuses to pop up from the ground, there was a 6-inch snowfall, and the wind rattled the window panes so loudly that sleep became impossible. When it seemed that spring would never arrive, Olivia began to question the emptiness of her life. 3 weeks later, Herbert went down on one knee and offered out a small velvet box. She nodded and allowed him to slip the diamond ring on her finger. Olivia was genuinely fond of Herbert, and when she promised to marry him, it was with the utmost sincerity. But that was before they started to discuss the aspects of their forthcoming life together. "Won't it be wonderful?" she said. "We can walk to work together every day." Herbert circled his arm around her waist and pulled her to him in a way that tugged her blouse loose from the band of her skirt. He hummed in her ear, making the same sound as a bee when it drains the nectar from a flower. "We'll do just that," he cooed, "until you've a bun in the oven." "Bun in the oven?" she repeated. Herbert grinned and affectionately patted her stomach. "A baby," he said, giving her a sly wink. "You know, a little tack. A Herbert Jr." "I know what it means," she replied testily. "But aren't you rushing things just a bit?" It was impossible not to notice the downturn of her mouth, so Herbert smoothed the situation over by claiming he was, of course, referring to such a time as they were ready for the thought of raising a family. He kissed Olivia, but when she closed her eyes, there in the back of her eyelids was the image of a woman with the look of hopelessness on her face and a bunch of babies clinging to her skirt. Olivia's eyes popped open, and she snapped her head back. "What if I don't want babies?" she asked rebelliously. "What about my job? There's a good chance I'll be promoted to the central office." "Babies are something every woman wants," Herbert said. "It's the natural way of life. Men work and women have babies." He gathered her into his arms and held her close. "Don't worry, sweetheart," he whispered. "When the time comes, you'll be itching to grab a hold of a baby just like every other woman." Although she let it go at that, a feeling of uneasiness started to settle in, and Olivia couldn't dismiss it. 3 days later, she telephoned both of her older sisters and asked if such a thing was true. Yes, indeed, they'd each answered. She then telephoned her mother and asked the same question. "Of course it's true, sugar," her mother said. "As a young girl, I used to imagine that someday I'd be singing at the Opera House in London, England. But after I married your daddy, I got the itch, and then along came Robert. The following year it was Albert, and after him Bernice." "But, Mama," Olivia interrupted, "didn't you think you'd missed out on something you truly wanted?" "Think?" her mother laughed.